go. Thank you. That's a piece called Castle Gregory, and it's a story song. A lot of my songs are story songs, and so a little bit later on, after we talk about the big story, we'll get into maybe some of the short stories and some of the songs. Heidi, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are very honored to have you here, and so honored to be launching your book tonight. We are here at the Pennsylvania Literary Festival at the Uniontown Mall, and this is Friday evening. We still have lots going on Saturday and Sunday, and Larry's going to be with us again on Sunday on the Going Live, and he's also going to be with us tomorrow. He's going to be on a panel. But right now, we want to launch his book. He is doing the very last in his trilogy, and it is the Vein Cycle. This one is going to be Vortex. And what's great, what I love, all of his books start with the letter V. And can you tell us a little bit how you came up with the original concept for the Vein Cycle?
Yeah, the Vein Cycle is it's a series of stories that all take place within a single 24-hour period. Now, I shouldn't say story. It is a novel. It's a fully formed novel. Each book is a novel, but the novels contain stories from various points of view, all within the same universe and the same plot line. But it begins about 10 o'clock at night, and the series, the first book runs through until about 6 o'clock the next morning. Now, at that point in the book, when you read the book, and this book is Veins, when people read Veins, they do feel that the book has come to a close because things have been tied up. The book comes to an end. But when Vipers begins, and Vipers the second one, when Vipers begins, I'm hoping that they realize that, as is the case with any novel, that there are a lot of loose ends that were left. And so what I do in Vipers is I begin pulling on those loose ends. And since the books are kind of an ensemble cast, I'm able to bring back the characters from Veins, but I'm also able to bring in some characters, some new characters in Vipers. And then the last book, Vortex, brings it full cycle. And in Vortex, we begin at about 2 in the afternoon and continue until 10 o'clock that night. So it's the following night, and the story wraps up there. And I think it works. I've been looking through the continuity. I've been making sure that everything lines up, and it's fun to see the vision, which was just an idea, a concept at the beginning of this journey, really wrapping up and everything tying together the way I hoped it would.
Yeah, that is an intriguing concept. I love that. For people who are interested, like in 24, like the TV show and so forth, that like that. And even Jurassic Park, if you recall, Jurassic Park happened, within. So I expect there are some very suspenseful and thriller-like moments within these books.
Yes, I did. Actually, Fantasys Enterprises, which is the publisher, is marketing them as supernatural thrillers. And the basic premise of the book, you did ask about the premise as well as the concept. The basic premise is that there are these creatures, there are these things, there are these entities, and they predate humanity. They predate most of the life on this planet, and for billions of years they were just entities. They were just existing. They existed in balance. And then as other life formed, they kind of co-opted that and worked with it and coexisted with it. And when humans came along, they coexisted for a while until they couldn't take it anymore, until they realized that it had gone too far, that the species that could have been the caretaker of the planet became the abuser of the planet. And if left to continue, the creatures, the humans, will destroy the planet. And at this point, the spirits try to find a way to step in and halt the progress. So the thriller is set up in an interesting way where we start off with a heist gone wrong. There's a couple of small-time crooks, and they have this great plan, but it doesn't quite go the way they planned. But then they find out, partway through the book, that their failed heist was actually part of a plan, a bigger plan set by these creatures in order for them to perform a heist of their own, which is to take back the Earth. Yeah, so that's the basic concept of it.
That's wonderful. Would you like to read us a little bit from, okay, you can tell us the setup for what you want to read to us, and I'm looking forward to listening.
Well, here's what we'll do. I've just finished working on Vortex, and so I've got very much have Vortex on my mind. And what I like to do, and we'll do a little bit of this later on, what I like to do when I'm reading is I don't actually read. I like to recite from memory as much as possible, much the way that when I perform music, I don't read the music and I don't read the songs. I just perform the songs from memory. So a lot of the stories that I do them from memory. And I do like to do the excerpts of the books from memory, except when it's something I've just worked on, just finished it. So I'm going to actually read this one, and I'm going to give you a little setup for this. This is, I have this on the iPad. And we're in Vortex now. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Vortex, which comes out, we're going into July. We're going to start having a series of soft releases all through July, and the big formal release will be June. Soft releases through June, and the big formal release July 1st. And while we're going through this month, the other books, Veins and Vipers, are coming out as ebooks for the first time. They've never been ebooks before. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from Vortex. Now here, at this point, there is a storm brewing. And the storm is like a tornado. It's like a vortex. It's a spinning whirlwind. It's a huge whirlwind, and it's rising up from the pit of an abandoned surface mine. Now, this is the same abandoned surface mine that kind of exists in the center of Veins and Vipers. But now a storm is brewing, and a character named Samuela has come to the brink of this crater where this big stationary tornado is rising up and is swirling slowly and spinning a wheel across the sky, and it's going to be doing something. It's going to break free. It's going to begin to cause havoc, but right now it's stationary, and nobody knows quite what it is. But Samuela has arrived here with a creature that she thinks might be an angel. And the creature is playing on those expectations and those desires with her. And this is a little bit of battle of wits before the angel takes Samuela on a ride to see the end of the world. So this comes from right in the middle of the book. And we'll see if my iPad is going to cooperate. So they are on the brink of the mine at this point. Thunder rumbled, and there was wind here too, first in the high branches, then whipping low as Castilla led her onto a table of hard-packed earth. They were nearing the high wall, the machined cliff at the crater's edge, coming into view of the dark stem of the spinning storm. "Let darkness and shadow of death stain the face of the deep," Castilla said. "Let the cloud dwell upon the abyss." She pulled away from him. "Something wrong?" "I think you know what's wrong." "Do I?" "You said you know everything." "I know what you know." "Then you know who you sound like when you talk scripture." "Was that scripture?" "Almost. Not exactly. But it's what she did. She changed things. She got things wrong. She twisted the words to suit her purposes." The cloud flashed and rumbled. "Samuela? My mother, that's who I'm talking about. When you talk scripture, you sound like my mother." "Really? Don't play me, Castilla. You know what I know, so you know all about her." "She was a prophet, Samuel." "I don't think so." She put an edge in her voice, making it clear the topic was closed. Then she peered over the sandstone ledge, straining to see the base of the storm. "You're too far back, Samuela. Come closer. right to the edge. You needn't fear falling. Your body is strong. If it breaks, it will heal. What do you mean? Exactly what I say. I don't speak parables, at least not now. She drew toward him, stopping a few inches from the brink. There was no barrier to mark the edge, no raised rim of rock, and certainly no rail. The ground just ended, fell away. She didn't dare lean forward, but she did look down, 1 foot behind the other as she lowered her gaze to take in the entire length of the spinning funnel, a tapering line plunging to a mist-covered hole 60 feet down. See? It's not so bad when you face it straight on. It's often that way. He removed his sash and flung it to the wind. It unfurled, rose, and vanished into the storm. Won't be needing that, or this. He lifted his arms. His robe billowed, sliding from his body. An instant later, it hovered above him, sleeves extended, hem rippling. It turned once, dancing in air, and then followed the sash into the spinning storm. She turned away, afraid of his nakedness. The robe and sash were baggage, Samuela. They'd only weigh us down. He spread his wings, then turned to offer the anvil of his back. Come on. He bent low into the wind, feathers splayed and trembling. Don't be afraid. His flanks were like polished stone, sculpted yet undefined, more mannequin than man. An irrational urge moved through her. She wanted to strip off her shredded halter and snakeskin skirt, toss them away, ride him skin on skin as he took to the air, but she couldn't, not yet. She approached him, leaned forward, put her arms around his neck. Hold tight. She drew her legs over his hips, flattened one fist against his chest, the other across his shoulder. Move with me. He leaned forward, kicked off. A jolt shook her as his feathers grabbed the air, a jarring transition from standing to flying. But after that, it was all rhythm and flow. His wings pushed and pulled, reaching up and angling back like oars working the wind. She hugged him tighter, easing forward, pressing her face to his and looking down. The mine was straight below them, more like a topographical map than a real-world terrain. Yet she didn't feel afraid, not yet, not until he folded his wings and dove. She gasped, held on. Don't be afraid. She held her breath, closed her eyes. You needn't fear falling. Straight down, faster and faster. She opened her eyes, and there was the ground so close she saw the falling shadow of Castige's wings spread dark against the mud. Closer and closer, she opened her mouth to scream, and then he caught the wind and broke their fall. The scream became a purge of breath, a long exhalation as gravity and momentum pressed her hard against his back. Now watch, he said. Look down. They flew low across the mine, over a jumble of trucks and vans that were visible one moment, then gone as green shoots engulfed them, growing from the crater floor, leaves unfurling, meshing into a green canopy. What is this? She asked. A vision. He turned, circling. This is the Winslow mine that would have been if your adversaries had taken control of the land, sealed the perimeter, and given their plan time to run its course. It's beautiful, she said, her words slipping out before she could stop them. It is, but evil often lurks in beauty, and this forest is only a cover, a mask for terrible forces burning deep within the rocks. He banked toward the setting sun, orange against the western hills, and in that glow, the trees began to move. Behold, Samuela, the day of fire. The branches swayed, rippling as something rose beneath them. Castilla circled. She watched. The forest heaved, swelled upward, then dropped back as if the ground were giving away. Trunks snapped, trees fell like dominoes and spilled toward the center of the crater where a pit was opening like the pupil of a giant eye. And the pupil was burning, filling first with black smoke and then with exploding light. The forest ignited. Fire spread, radiating outward. Flames broke against the high wall, a blazing surf capped with blackened mist. And rising out of those breakers, breaching like glowing whales, a swarm of serpents screamed and took to the air. They flew close. She felt the heat of their scales, the rage of their eyes. There were hundreds of them, then thousands, each more terrible than the one she had seen in the forest. That had been an infant, a stunted dwarf set free before its time, but these creatures flew on wings of burning ether. Spikes lined their backs, trailing lightning, igniting the sky as they scattered to the wind. Castija flew higher, above the heat and smoke, into the realm of crystal air where thread-like clouds scattered like dust in his wake. He leveled off. The earth was far below them now, curved like a bowl, dotted with flames of burning cities and towns. The vectors of a scorched earth, Samuela. If your adversaries had gotten their way, these creatures would have gathered their strength underground and then hatched to breathe fire over the land. And after them, more would have followed, enough to overwhelm all the works of man. Watch now, I'll show you. He folded his wings, descended back into the heated air, back to the site of Winslow Mine where something massive rose from the burning crater. A wedge appeared, jagged, serrated, a blackened peak riddled with glowing veins.
Wonderful. Completely engaged in that, completely engaged. I was in that world completely at that time. That's wonderful. Yes, that's always a delight as a reader, to feel like you could become a part of this world. And as you said, being that it takes place within this 24-hour period, I can imagine being someone who has come to this with all 3 novels out there, that they're just going to devour them, each one right after the other. Yes, and that's every writer's dream, to have their work devoured as such. When we were discussing all of your V-books, I know that you also have a couple of collections of stories, because like you said, you are a storyteller, and it is all about the stories. Do you want to tell us about your other collections?
Sure. Absolutely. The other books, well, we have Veins. Let's see. We're thinking Vipers. 2 story collections. Now, these are all V's. Now, here's the idea. The concept. Fantasist Enterprises had this concept at the beginning that we would do 5 books in 5 years, and then when the last book came out, and they'd all be V titles. So there's Veins, Vipers, Vortex, Visions, and Voices. And Visions and Voices are the story collections. Now, the idea is now, when Vortex comes out, Fantasist is going to have this special box set, and guess what's going to be on it? A V. 5 books, right? Is that? So this is the kind of advanced planning that we really count on our marketing departments to come up with. But we were talking earlier, and I was playing some music at the beginning of this session, and I'm also a musician and a songwriter. And when songwriters perform their songs, no one ever expects the songwriter to show up with his songbook and sing from the songbook. So why should we expect our short story writers to show up with their books? Why not just take the books, put them aside, and do the stories from memory? This story is called Step on a Crack.
This is one of my favorites.
All right, thank you. Chaz was different. All the kids knew that. He believed things. When Billy Jacobs told him there were ghosts in the attic, Chaz nodded as if Billy's lie had been the gospel truth. And then Billy went about his business, which involved things like staring at the swirls in plaster walls or the wood grain patterns in strips of plywood. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was thinking about the ghosts. "Ah, Chaz, Billy was only kidding." But Chaz just shook his head. "Nah, there's ghosts up there. Go check. You'll see." And damned if I didn't believe him. You see, Chaz had a knack for turning lies into truth. Now, I'll never forget the time when Judy Hendershot told him about cracks and lines. Now, by then, most kids knew better than to fill Chaz's head with lies, but Judy was new on the street. She thought Chaz needed to be messed with. She walked up beside him as he stood on the sidewalk. "Hey, boy," she said, "be careful." And Chaz turned real slow, and he gave her that squint-eyed expression that made him look like he was peeking through a keyhole. He didn't say anything, so Judy pointed to his shoes. "Look," she said. And when Chaz looked, he saw that his left heel was just an inch away from a crack in the sidewalk. Well, we all saw it coming, but before anybody could stop her, she said, "Step on a crack, break a grown-up's back. Step on a line, break a daddy's spine." And then, in a burst of poetic inventiveness that for a moment made us forget the terrible implications of putting lies in Chaz's mind, she added, "Jump over a crack, break a daddy's sacroiliac." Well, we thought that was funny, not that we knew what a sacroiliac was. We thought it was a butthole, but Chaz just kept staring, first at Judy, and then along the sidewalk, his squinty eyes picking out all those cracks and lines. Well, we all saw what was coming, but before anybody could stop him, Chaz took off down the sidewalk, stepping on cracks and lines like they were bugs and worms. Now, sometimes he'd land on a line with both heels and then jump forward over a crack, and all along the street, people collapsed in pain. We tried to stop him, but that only made him run faster. It was me that caught him. I dove and grabbed his legs, and he fell forward, and to this day, I don't know why he didn't put out his hands to break the fall. His head slammed the pavement, and the concussion went right through his legs and into my arms, and, well, after that, everything changed. All those people with broken backs and sacroiliacs, they rose up like they'd been cured by Jesus. Everybody was fine. Everybody, that is, but Chaz. Now, I don't know how Chaz was able to turn lies into truth, but I want to learn. I spend a lot of time staring at the plaster swirls and wood grain patterns and strips of plywood, and I try believing that Chaz isn't gone. I try believing that he's standing right beside me. I try believing that everything's the same as it was before Judy Hendershot told him that crazy crack and line poem. And sometimes, when I squint my eyes just right, I can almost see him staring at me from the wood grain patterns of the attic door.
I love that one. I love that one. It was great. And you're right, it's very intuitive to be a storyteller, to tell your stories rather than read them. So I'm glad you shared that with us. What maybe some of you don't know is that Lawrence and I are mentors at Seton Hill together. In fact, he was the breeder for my thesis novel whenever I was a student there, so that's how we first met. So we have a long history together. And I can remember going to see you whenever you were playing a while back now, and I was wondering, would you play some more for us? That'd be great.
Songs are stories, and so this is now what we expect to see when a storyteller shows up and tells stories. But the tradition of storytelling, of course, was the scop who would go around and sing his tales. So I also sing some tales. This is a song about a boy on the west coast of Ireland who wakes up one morning and looks out into his bay where ships seldom come, and he sees that there's a ship that has lost its wind or has somehow gotten moored off of the coast, and this is his chance to escape his sleepy little town, maybe join up with the men and sail on the ship and say goodbye to his sleepy little village. So this is that song. Now this song is titled Castle Gregory. Castle Gregory is the name of a town on the west coast of Ireland. Now, here it is. the sails of Castle Gregory reflected in mirrored sea. Hear the men singing on the quay, echo and chants calling me. On the shore, a lonely woman stands, hair tied back, braided bands. Hear her voice calling to the sails, echo and chants, soulful wails. In the dawn, the jagged sea turns white, drawing the ships made ready in the night. On the deck, young Lorcan trims the sails, singing with the men shanty wails. See the sails of Castle Gregory reflected in mirrored sea. Hear the men singing on the quay, echo and chants calling me. Here you are. Thank you.
Now, do you write all of your own music?
Not all of it. I've been playing regularly at a place in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, called the Poorhouse, Riley's Poorhouse, and I do some of my own music there. And I'm going to be doing a big reunion show with my old bandmate, one of my best friends in the world, Christopher Lockery. We're going to be doing a Lockery Connolly band reunion at Riley's Poorhouse on June 7th. So when I play with Lockery Connolly, we will do a lot of the original songs that we wrote together. I'm going to be going out and visiting my brothers in Colorado, and we're going to be playing out in Colorado, and we're going to be doing a lot of our original stuff out there. But a lot of the times when I'm at Riley's, I'll be playing my stuff, and then somebody will come up and say, well, that's really good, but can you play? And I get the craziest requests, and I always try to honor them. So last time, a guy was looking for something by Frank Sinatra. I guess something in him, something I did maybe made him think of Frank Sinatra. But here's a funny story. This is a story. My brother and I were going through Ireland, and the beauty of Ireland is that they don't pay musicians a lot, but they'll always give them room and board. So we would pull into town with our guitars and walk down the street and keep walking down the street until somebody said, come on in, lads, and have something to eat. And we were playing in a crowded pub in Tralee one night, and we're doing all the Irish stuff. We're killing the Irish stuff. It's great. And it's packed, and this person comes, fighting through the crowd, finally gets up to the front, and we say, oh, okay, she's going to stump us. She's going to ask for some really obscure Celtic song. And she says, can you guys do, now, of course she did it with an Irish accent, can you guys do Sweet Home Alabama? I said, maybe, we can try. She says, well, that's okay. If you can't, maybe you can do Summertime. So we did them both, but that was when I learned that if you're gonna play, you've got to have your original stuff, you've got to have your traditional stuff, you've got to have the things you think the people are going to want, but you've always got to be willing to reach back into the memory vault and do something crazy that's far back in the memory. But long answer to your very short question. Yes, I do play original music, and you can actually hear some of it at my website, lawrenceconnolly.com. I do have some of it up there for free, since a lot of the CDs are out of print, and I like doing the originals. Thanks for asking.
And another thing that I wanted to ask you about, so our viewers may not realize that you actually had one of your short stories made into a movie twice. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
The first one was made at the end of the 80s, and it appeared in Twilight Zone magazine. And somebody called from Hollywood and said, I'd like to option your story for a film. And what it was a very high budget showcase film that this young filmmaker was going to make to show at the festivals, to win some awards and make a name for himself, so he could then step up and get better contracts, better deals. So they spent a ton of money on it, and it was shot in 35 millimeter, beautiful musical score, terrific acting, great cinematography, and I got invited to go. They invited me to go out to the debut, and I said, I'm not going to go because it's going to stink. I mean, there's no way this movie's going to be any good. Not that the story wasn't good, but I was just thinking, how can a short film be any good? And I got a VHS tape of it in the mail a couple of weeks later, and it was jaw-dropping. It was absolutely astounding. And I figured, well, that's good. That's as far as I'm going to go with movies. And then about 15 years later, another film director got in touch with me, this time from New York. And this one you can see online. This one, if you go online and you Google my name, Lawrence C. Connolly, and the name of the story, Echoes. So go to YouTube and do this, and you'll get the film. It's up there for free. It's 8 minutes long, and it's amazing too. Amazing cinematography. It won Best Cinematography at the Fusion Film Festival in New York City. So there are those stories. I've got a few other things optioned from some very heavy hitters in Hollywood, but those are the ones that have been made.
That's wonderful. And I think that how are we doing on time? We're going to get a time check here for just a moment. Oh, great. So we have about 10 minutes left. I wondered if there was something specific that you wanted to talk about, or if you just wanted to play more music.
I could play another song, since you asked about the originals. This time I'll do a different kind of story song. This is a love song. Oh, the last one was too. It was a love song, in love with freedom, I guess. But this one is it's a first date song, and it's about an intersection in Chicago where I used to live, intersection of Broadway and Roscoe. And if I can remember it, it's going to be great. So hang on.
We'll never know.
That's right. Let me get a dose of this. Now, this one I think actually might be online. This is from a CD that I did with the Lawrence Connolly Band quite a few years ago, and oh, good. All right, good. It's called 5 Minute Walk. A handful of time, glass filled with wine, rush past my eyes in the second that it takes to say hello. And I'm amazed at how long it took to ask her out alone. I fumble a pass, she smiles through the glass, while the glow in her cheeks seems to speak that it's time that we both go. And it's a 5-minute walk up Broadway to Roscoe and home. She brings a bag to keep her dreams in. I put my key into the lock, turn the knob and begin to understand the ways February days when the lines that I find seem like something that I mean, and I don't really know if the actor is really me. She brings a bag to keep her dreams in. I put my arms around her waist and tumble down, while the crickets in the night mutter softly while deep within my soul. Oh, I'm amazed at how long it took to ask her out alone. And it's a 5-minute walk up Broadway to Ross going home. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I remembered it.
Yes, as though you ever forgot, please. Well, this has been wonderful. I'm so glad that you were able to share this with us. And we wish you much success on Vortex and the entire Vein cycle. Don't forget that Larry will be here tomorrow and Sunday, and that you can also visit him online, and that is at www.lawrenceconnolly.com. It's right up there. Yes. Oh, there you go. And you can find him on Twitter at LC Connolly. He would love to hear your tweets as well. Thank you very much, and we will see you soon.